Welcome to Snippets of Wisdom with your host, Mike Corral and Dr. Michael J. Murphy. Snippets of Wisdom is the boomer's gift to the next generation and to the world at large. Dr. Michael J. Murphy and Coach Mike Corral are experienced psychotherapists, writers, and healers who find the greatest satisfaction in sharing the benefits of a lifetime of struggle and learning. Coach Mike has spent decades spreading deep wisdom and supporting youth through the juvenile justice system. Dr. Michael has directed mental health services at many correctional centers and testified in countless trials as an expert in sex-related issues and mental illness. And he was one of the 500,000 humans at Woodstock. So now, please welcome the hosts of Snippets of Wisdom.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Snippets of Wisdom. I hope you're enjoying this holiday season. We have a great show prepared for you today. We're going to talk about the psychology of money. Dr. Clare Graves wrote a book called Values, Human Values and the Evolution of Consciousness. And he describes 8 human values that can really help us understand the financial decisions and the reactions to economic events that are deeply rooted in person society and in dominant coping mechanisms throughout the world. So let's check this out. At the very basic level, we have what is described by the beige color. It's just an arbitrary color, but the level of survival, where money and debt are largely irrelevant concepts. So the focus is mainly on surviving. It's the time of hunting and gathering, foraging. They didn't think about money at that particular time in history because it was not even an issue. It was, you just hunted for what you needed, and that was it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about all of these different levels and how they impact our economic system today and human psychology and interaction. So, Dr. Murphy, it says that the next level is all about security, where money is viewed in terms of the tribe's well-being and safety. What do you think about, they, how do you think they dealt with debt back at that time?
So it's great to be with you again and to talk about this very, very, very important topic that is so central to so many people's lives, and that is money. Do we have enough money? I mean, is it being shared equitably? We're going to get into all of those deep concepts in this conversation today. And I think that issue that you bring up, I mean, how did we fundamentally make choices about how to share the resources that we have? I mean, money essentially is the quantification of resources, right? So somehow we had to come up with some way to organize the resources that we had so that we could share them with each other in some way that we believed was appropriate or fair or just. Yeah, and
Right.
that's the complexity that has evolved over the thousands of years that humanity has existed since way back in the day when as you mentioned, we were just struggling to survive each day to gather enough food uh, to be able to live that day. And we certainly didn't have the opportunity back in those days to save resources over a long period of time. There weren't any refrigerators, there weren't any freezers, there weren't any mechanisms
Right.
to hoard resources. Therefore, we consumed our resources right away, and they were gone.
Understood.
And
Mhm.
but then over time, we constructed the capacity to uh, retain and accumulate resources over a period of time, and that allowed for the what we call the accumulation of wealth. So some
Yeah.
people could have more than other people. There emerged the possibility that some people would have a lot of resources and others would not. It's interesting. I think she talks about this in her book as well, is the people who had had the capacity to share more resources with others had more status in the community, right? So if you're one of the people who was an expert hunter, who was an expert at raising crops and harvesting crops, then you had more status because you were able to share those resources with other people. And
Right.
therefore, the group, the clan, the larger clan had more of a likelihood that they were going to survive. So the issue of money and the accumulation of resources, and then subsequently the possibility for the imbalance of the accumulation of those resources really became one of the fundamental issues with regard to civilization itself, right? So we
Yes.
had all
Yes.
those models of the past, whether there was a nobility or kings and queens and the royalty or the upper class people who had more resources, and those who were considered to be serfs or even slaves who whose job it was to accumulate resources for others and then to maybe have the opportunity to retain some of those resources for themselves. So
Right.
that's the long pattern of human civilization that we are left with now. And even
Yeah.
now today, something that we'll be talking about, I think, a lot is, we're currently now in the world, I think, and certainly in the United States, we're struggling to determine how we can share resources in a way that is more fair or more equitable.
Yeah.
And we're trying to reconsider the models that we have here in the United States and around the world, what we call capitalism. And maybe that's being influenced by other forms of economic thought
Yeah.
uh, as to
Which
how we will share and preserve resources.
yes, and the American way has more to do with capitalism probably than a lot of other countries. But when you think about the mindset that has carried over, that has evolved with us, there are certain segments of the population that have maintained that tribalistic mindset, and these are people, for instance, have customs such as the communal sharing of resources, collective decision making. They make decisions as a collective, uh, kind of like democracy was originally um, used for. Um, and it was used to regard their wealth, and there were actually rituals that they had that involved giving and redistributing, their possessions, and it was used to strengthen the social bonds back in the day. We do that today. We still use that to strengthen our social bonds. Uh, to give you some examples, people would have these ceremonies, ceremonies, like potluck ceremonies we do today, amongst the Pacific Northwest tribes. And it involved feasting and celebrating and giving away to affirm their status, to affirm that we have been successful, and we have been so successful that we have enough to share beyond our own personal needs. And so those are things that have carried over from the very basic values that began as civilization began to evolve. Uh, what about the next level? Because this one bleeds into the sense of power. Uh, when you had enough to share, it felt powerful. And then that became a sign of weakness, to be exploited, or maybe to even challenge other people through dominance, right?
Right. When you think about the psychology of money, that's where that starts to emerge. Some groups or maybe some people or individuals might have the ability to accumulate um, resources that would allow them to survive for a longer period of time over
Mhm.
another group of people who might have a smaller maintained level of resources. So when one group has more than another group, then you have the emergence of that imbalance. And then there are power conflicts about how those imbalances are resolved, right? So you have the emergence of a group of people who may be more efficient at accumulating resources than another group, and then they have a higher status, and so
Yeah.
the other group feels like they uh, are left with a feeling of insecurity with regard to their survival. So
Yeah.
ultimately, it's all about survival, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
if a group is designated for whatever reason by virtue of their location or their color or their size or their gender, for any reason, if they're left in a circumstance where they um, are less likely to have uh, secure access to resources, then there's an imbalance in power between those groups, right? And so
Yeah.
then there becomes this dynamic of uh, that that group can be exploited, or the group can feel like they're disempowered. They don't have the opportunity to do the things or have the things that another group did. And so over most of the course of humanity, that's the way that it was. We had these powerful groups who were kings or nobles or dukes or queens or uh, princesses who had access to lots of resources, and then you had another group that's whose job it was to supply those resources. I came from my ancestors very closely. My grandparents actually escaped from Ireland, due to those very circumstances. I mean, they felt like they were not able to survive there. So they came to the United States, like so many millions of immigrants,
Mhm.
because they thought that if they came to the United States, they'd have an improved probability of being able to survive fundamentally, just to have a life and maintain a life. And so the survival drive is intimately interwoven with, the concept of how do we preserve resources. And one of the ways that we do that is to infuse it into this thing we call money. And
Yeah.
that allows for the management and the exchange and the accumulation ultimately of resources, which in time can contribute to a high degree of unfairness that we are
Yeah.
starting to struggle with now, here
Yeah.
in the United States and around the world.
So I have a question with regards to the values level. So these all these eight value levels still exist, and people across the world, and all of us, we're all of one level or another. In other words, we're all of one mindset or the other. Whether you have a strong survival mindset, which is at the very basic, you don't save a lot of money for the future. It's all about surviving right now. And then the next level is security, where money is viewed in terms of the tribe's well-being and safety. It's a safety issue. And then the next level is power, where debt is a sign of weakness. So you want to overcome that weakness, and you accumulate power by accumulating wealth, right? And then the next level, which is what we're coming to next, it's the level of order, where debt becomes a moral issue. Good people pay their debts, and they adhere to the rules, and just kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and same level, where people believe that rules are a significant part of our evolution in our development as a human race, right? So
Right. So ultimately, we're seeing that, and I think you're talking about the fact that ultimately money and resources and the manipulation of resources becomes a moral issue as well.
yeah,
Decisions about who's good and who's not so good, or who even is evil. If you think about, the ways that justifications were created for certain wars, World War II
yeah,
was really started on the specification that a certain group was not not acceptable in some way. So there need to be a struggle against that group, and they were subjected to, heinous
Yeah.
sorts of exploitation, and
Right.
so, and ultimately, uh, terrible forms of aggression.
Yeah.
So money and decisions about right and wrong are fundamental, and that's something that we'll be talking about, as I understand it, when we get back in 1 minute, right? So please stick with us, and we'll get to the bottom of this eventually.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And welcome back. We're talking about the different values levels, and the psychology of money. We're talking right now about order, represented by blue, where debt is a moral issue. Good people pay their debts, they stick to the rules. Money is a means to stability and future rewards. For example, retirement, inheritance, legacy. And it's all part of a structured system. It's interesting to see how these things play out in our society. Um, Back in the day in the '60s, Dr. Murphy, remember Woodstock, and you were actually there. That was a time when we were actually trying to bring people together, and we had a message with our uh, communal mindset. Tell us a little bit about that and how it applies to the psychology of money today.
Oh, that was such an interesting and exciting time. The boomer generation, which, as you're well aware, is one of the largest, if not the largest, group of humanity ever to come up at any time.
Yeah,
Everybody returned after World War II. There's millions and millions of people when that horrible conflict was finally resolved. And,
yeah,
I remember, one day my sister rolled up in a car and asked me if I wanted to go to a concert. And I jumped in the car, and the next thing I realized, after a couple of hours of driving, that we were at this concert, which later became so famous, known as Woodstock.
yeah,
So I was just there wandering through the crowd. I think I was 16 years old at the time. And one of the things I thought about as I was there is that just what an amazing experience of sharing that was. I
yeah,
mean, there were 500,000 people there, and everybody got along just fine. I mean,
yeah,
people shared their food, they shared their beverages, they may even have shared their drugs, just between you and me and whoever else is listening. But there really was just this deep feeling of cooperation and sharing that really activates the sort of the hippie mentality that was
yeah,
going on then. And we
Yeah.
were looking at our parents who had worked so hard in their lives. They got up and they went off to work, oftentimes very difficult and challenging jobs,
Right.
sometimes painful and even dangerous jobs, you know, to earn money for the family and preserve, you know, some wealth so that they could have a place to live and have an automobile and have food, maybe even have some health insurance and vacation time, maybe in those
Hmm.
days. But
Yeah.
we boomers, you know, this huge generation, were looking at our parents and thinking, geez, maybe this can be different. Maybe somehow we could figure out a way to share resources in a way that would be more fair.
Yeah.
And, you know, interestingly enough, that's how the ideas, as complex and as oftentimes unsuccessful as they were, of socialism and communism came up, because
Yeah.
it was just another economic system to figure out a more fair way to share resources, to say, okay, I'm not going to have a lot where you have a little, where somebody else won't have, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars where somebody else is living on the street. And we wanted to address those inherent unfairnesses in economic systems,
Hmm.
and that sometimes emerge in a capitalist system. And we figured maybe we could come up with another way of sharing that would be more fair, more just, more
Yeah.
equal for everybody, in a way that everybody wins. And
Yeah.
that's what we thought back then in the Woodstock moment. And here we are, you know, many decades later, still struggling with that problem. I mean, trying to come up with a better answer for how we
Yeah.
utilize the resources of this world in a
Yeah.
way that's more fair and just.
That that community mindset is two levels up, and it's so interesting because in between that level, the level of order and the level of community, in the middle of that, there is the level of achievement, which is a whole different values level. And that achievement is where our parents were, uh, for the most part, generally speaking, because they saw debt as a strategic tool. Not necessarily our parents per se, but people in general saw debt as a tool that would help them manage achievement and manage the opportunities to get things done, lending people money so that they can create their own American dream, or build their business, or owning land and being indebted to each other. But it was all tied in. It was still all tied in. There wasn't so much where uh, people wanted to dominate each other by putting them in debt to them. You know, it was primarily a metric of success and progress. But it involved a lot of calculation. You had to calculate risks. You had to calculate investment opportunity and strategic planning in different ways, so that it could stabilize your situation. So that was a financial mindset. But
Yeah, yeah.
beyond that is where our sense of community that was actually demonstrated in Woodstock. Money and debt were viewed like through I would have to say a social justice lens. Why can't we all just share? Why can't we all just be a community and you know and share our resources?
Yeah, one of
So
the examples of that, I think, back in those days, for the boomer generation, now we're way past that stage, but we were just getting our education at that point. I mean, I was,
yeah,
you know, just getting ready to enter college. So if people could go to college, well, you had to pay for college, and college, interestingly enough, back then was much less expensive in most colleges
yeah,
than it is today. But
yeah,
you know, you did have to invest, like you're saying. You may have had to borrow some money to be able to pay tuition and room and board at
sure,
college, so you could obtain an education, which
yeah,
then allowed you to have skills that allowed you to maybe achieve a higher level of status
right,
in society through being a professional, being a doctor, being a lawyer,
yeah,
being a being an engineer, someone who had skills, as they say, that were more valuable to the community, and
Yeah.
therefore got you more resources and more of an opportunity to uh, you're
And I
able to
think,
take the risk and invest in yourself.
yes, exactly. And then, I think scholarships existed uh, pretty much as an investment in people that showed potential. Young people who showed potential were eligible and still are eligible for scholarships. It's the people behind those scholarships that were giving those saw them as someone to invest in because it could create benefits for more people. Athletes, prodigies, artistic prodigies, and even academic people uh, got scholarships because they were viewed as an investment opportunity, right?
That's a great point. And one of the things that I experienced in supervising services that are provided in jails and prisons, overseeing the conduct and the treatment of people who were incarcerated and are incarcerated, is that those individuals were much less likely to have a higher level of education. So one of the
Right.
opportunities that they had less access to, for whatever reason, is that they did not have as much of an access to higher levels or more sophisticated levels of education, and
Correct.
therefore they didn't have the chance to invest in themselves in that way. So they were more likely to seek success in other ways that were less maybe consistent with the law, that eventually got them into trouble with addiction or something like that. So this started the whole examination of the meaning of money in terms of opportunity, and seeking, once again to say, okay, if we're going to have these institutions and these opportunities that are limited to people who have these skills, then we need to create a system that allows more fairness in terms of access to the learning that you need to have in order to acquire those skills. So status and opportunity and investment uh, were all interwoven. And so the ethic of sharing that came up with Woodstock, and we really do want to give everybody the opportunity to have uh, the chance to actualize themselves, the next level of that economic system. When you do actually have the chance to do something that you believe is more of an opportunity for you to be the person who you want to be and to use the skills that you uh, happen to have. So, even today, this is a dynamic that we continue to struggle with. And I think all of the conflicts that we see in the world are somehow related to this very issue, happening right now as we try to deal with international relations, here in the United States. And we make decisions about, how we manage the resources and the debt, here in the United States.
Yeah. Which takes us right to the next level because the next one is a systemic value. Debt and money are used are seen as abstract parts of a complex interconnected system. So it becomes if we didn't have it explains our whole economic system really because if it wasn't for debt and money our economic system would not exist. So the psychology of money involves understanding how these systems actually function and their functionality, how the functionality works for sustainable outcomes, so that we can provide to other countries that don't have what we have, and so that And originally, when we were still welcoming people into the United States, it was for that reason to provide opportunity for people in other countries that didn't have it. It was the place where you come uh, to start again, to start a whole new life.
Right. That's the thing that happened with my grandparents, certainly as they escaped from Ireland. But something that we'll see is that we can influence opportunity, but we can't necessarily control outcome. So we'll be talking about that when we come back.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
And so, welcome back. So you can see the effects that money has, not just at a national level, but the international events that are taking place are all influenced by how we view money and how we relate to it, and the psychology of our values on money. These are value systems that operate on societal levels, influencing national policies, international relationships. And so we're going to talk now a little bit about that actual power, how nations might use debt as a form of dominance, exploiting weaker nations, for example. Um, it's obvious that we have concerns about immigration and borders and different things like that, and different policies on immigration, different views on immigration. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's discuss that, because there are so many varying opinions about what should happen with regards to setting up borders in our country and allowing people to come in, the legality of it, the rights that immigrants should have. When you really think about it, we are a nation of immigrants, and who's to say when do we close the doors, and do we close the doors fully, completely, or do we allow opportunity according to our ability? What are some different views on that, Dr. Murphy?
Right. There's that famous statement, that we've all heard uh, from, I think it was either the Communist Manifesto or something like that, from each according to his abilities and to each according to his needs.
Mao
That's
Zedong and
idealistic statement
yes,
that
yep,
everyone should have the opportunity to survive, right? We should have what we need in order to live, right? We should not
yeah,
be denied, the fundamental necessities in order to have food, clothing, and shelter that allows us to live, right?
right,
And so that's one thing that we think that people should have morally. It's just right. And people should be able to contribute to society to the level that they have the capacity to do so, right? So from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs.
yeah,
But then things get very complicated from there, right? So now
absolutely,
now
yeah,
it sounds real simple, but then you get to the boomer generation now, and we're this huge generation that over the course of our lifetime since Woodstock, we've had jobs, we've done things, we may have accumulated some resources,
Mhm.
maybe more than we actually need in order to survive. And
Right.
the question then is, how are those resources distributed to others who may need them more? And that is the so-called migrant population. I mean, we supposedly, I think some people estimate that there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million people who entered the United States in recent decades from other countries, and they need to be taken care of. I mean, they have and want to have the opportunity to live and even to thrive. And what is fair and just with regard to them? You know, making these decisions about how the limited resources of the planet Earth should be distributed to people who, who, just by virtue of their circumstances, may have happened to be born in an impoverished situation
Mhm.
where they don't have access to the necessities of life. So they seek to go elsewhere, as you know, many millions of human beings have done for many hundreds and even thousands of years over the course of the evolution of this planet, right? So these are hard decisions that we're faced with now, just as urgently as humanity has been over the thousands of years in the past.
Right.
So, you know, I don't know if we have a solution yet. What are your thoughts about that, Coach Mike? Do you have any thoughts about how we might resolve that impasse?
Well, the thing is, we have become complacent in many ways, and we accept more readily these blanket policies um, that create collateral damage to one person or another, to a group or another. Um, and I think it's really important for all of us to really consider the humanity, the human lives behind every situation. I think every situation deserves the scrutiny of looking into and see how are the collateral effects going to impact individuals. When you look at immigration and families that have in their mind strategically decided it would be best if my kids could be born in the United States, even though they're not legally here, and they didn't have the wherewithal to do the whole process, and maybe gambled on the opportunity to create something for their kids. Some of these things are not thought out well. Then you have people who are escaping dire circumstances in the country that they live in, who actually need, you know, help, and they need a place to go, where they can feel safe. There are so many different situations and so many different circumstances that need to be looked at. And yeah, sometimes the law can override human needs. Sometimes you throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, and you create more problems in the collateral damage than you actually, you know, create solutions. So I think we just all need to consider each situation as much as we can and do the best that we can as individuals to open people up to the responsibilities of living in America. Not just you can go there and have the American dream, but there are consequences to everything, and there's a way to do things.
You know, it's very interesting. I think about that Woodstock moment, you know, when I was there wandering in the rain. I remember sleeping under a tree in the rain, but
Yeah.
people would loan food and people would give you a blanket, and people were very kind and considerate. And the amazing thing is that by and large, it's been my experience over the course of a long lifetime now that almost all human beings are caring and generous and kind. The people I run into, you
Yeah.
know, every day. Even my work in jails and prisons, I mean, it's amazing how cooperative, even in those environments, we see the things on TV, but it's nothing like that in reality. In fact, even those institutions operate in a very orderly way. Uh,
Mhm.
that's fundamentally consistent with a considerable amount of kindness and caring. People want to do the best they can. Wherever you find yourself and traveling around this world, you find good people. You find caring people who want to be helpful and to be of service to others. And that's fundamentally the Woodstock ethic, that people fundamentally want to be kind to others. They want to share with others. And how can we implement that in
Hmm.
some kind of economic system that will represent those values of kindness and sharing and equality
Hmm.
that we all value, the vast majority of us value and want. While at
Yeah.
the same time, we want to be able to take care of our families, take care of ourselves, you know, make sure that we are safe. So it really is, the ongoing struggle to clarify how we can fairly distribute the assets that we
Yeah.
happen to come upon um, over the course of a lifetime. And now we face this moment ourselves, the boomer generation, as we're older, and we may have some resources, and how are we going to deal with that situation as we approach the end of our lives? And so the issue of survival, healthcare, life and death are also fundamental economic issues. And I mean, the biggest um, financial system in the world is the biggest financial system in the world is the American healthcare system. It consumes trillions of dollars every year. So we're really, uh, that's the decision that we've made, is to allocate a gigantic amount of our resources to what can be called healthcare, or maybe even sick care. So, and
Yes.
that issue is one that we face. Uh, Most urgently right now, as the boomer generation, the biggest generation ever, moves into old age, uh, where we're more likely to be in need of medical care and services. And how do we want to make our decisions about uh, end of life care, which is a huge both justice and philosophical and moral issue that we are addressing right now.
I think that is a really important part of um, achieving the outcomes that we all want. When you take a look at it, when you stand back, take a look at it, the variance in values actually keeps balance in the world, on the earth, and at a global level. I think it's important more now than ever for us to share our perspective, our values with each other. Let people understand, or allow people to understand what it's like from our perspective, and the different things that we're going through, our philosophy of life, and our philosophy on death, so that we can have that peace of mind, or anticipate the peace of mind for everyone. You know, when you take a look at people's decisions, my mom had a do not resuscitate, a DNR, and when she passed, it was a situation where um, we gave her permission, and we felt good about her moving on into the next, into the next dimension, if so to speak. But it's not that easy for everyone. I know, and I'm grateful that she had the presence of mind, to make that decision, because it actually was a relief to all of us. So, and that's a good topic for another show. Thank you for being with us. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned and come back to visit us again. We've got more snippets of wisdom for all of you. Dr. Murphy, can you share how people can reach you?
Yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, which is such a fundamentally important and critical one for all of us at this moment in time. I mean, I have a book out there, Opioid Odyssey, can be accessed and purchased, and I'd love to have you look at it on Amazon. I have a website, psychologicalinvestigations.com, where I have material and gives information as to how I can be reached. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share and discuss this very important topic.
Absolutely. If you would like to reach out to me, you can go to olcp.life um, and get a free opportunity to get a discovery call, have a free session with me, and uh, be sure to, like I said, like and subscribe to this channel. And we'll see you again next week. Oh, no, you won't. You won't see us next week because we'll see your rerun. And it'll be happy holidays to all of you. We'll probably see you in a couple of weeks.
Yes,
Uh,
happy holidays, and I'm sure we can all share everything we have in this wonderful season. That's all about giving and sharing and loving our neighbors and our families and ourselves.
yeah, for sure. So let me see. Oh, okay. Zach's trying to communicate with us. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate that. Um, we might still have a little bit of time. Do you have another snippet that you want to share with everybody, Dr. Murphy?
I think that it is, fundamentally this issue of talking about money, the psychology of money as being related to values. So I think the values that we choose to have with regard to ourselves, what we choose to believe is right and wrong, is these are the decisions that ultimately have a huge financial implication.
For
The
sure.
Woodstock moment essentially was a time when we were making decisions about what was right and what was wrong, how we wanted to spend our lives, how we wanted to spend our uh, limited period of time that we have, to spend on this planet. So money and values really are, and values are a way of really defining how we're going to manage resources, including financial resources. That is money. And I think that that's something that we really need to have open conversations about. All of us need to talk about this issue openly with everyone else in the world, in our communities and our families. Have the conversations over the Christmas table, when you're having a meal about what you think is right and what you think is worth doing in terms of how we make choices about the distribution of assets that we have.
I'll tell you what, we have time for one quick break and come back and share a little bit more on that because you just touched on something really important. We go on a break, Zach?
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Mike Zorich, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the
Surprise, we're still here.
We're
um,
back. Yes,
we're back.
we are back.
This is a great time to let you know what each of us does. We have about 5 minutes left here. But Dr. Murphy is a forensic psychologist and psychotherapist, and he is a expert in the field of relationships and all all kinds of sociological levels, different levels of psychology. And you can reach him through his website, which is what is it again, Dr. Murphy?
Psychologicalinvestigations.com. So
.com.
psychologicalinvestigations.com has lots of resources there, things that I've written, access to my book, Opioid Odyssey, which is a happy opioid crisis book about what works to help people to recover from substance dependency. And lots of other stuff is available on that website.
That's good. So now, you know how to get a hold of him. If you need any kind of life coaching or even some hypnotherapy, feel free to reach out to me at olcp.life. Um, I'll do a free discovery call for you, help you find out where you need to go next, plan out your life, and move from there. The thing is, we all need each other in one way or another. The more we're able to share our insights and our perspective on the world, the greater the opportunity becomes for all of us to have an understanding and work together peaceably. And that peace of mind, that understanding, and that sense of calm that we can gain from doing that can actually have a global impact, believe it or not. If we just talk to two people who talk to two people about this peace of mind and understanding, you'd be surprised how soon we could reach the global level and how we can impact each other one person at a time. Important thing to realize is that your mind is a powerful tool. And if you use your mind power, you have the opportunity to move mountains, so to speak. And so there you have it. Dr. Murphy, thank you for being my co-host and for working with me on these things.
Thank you so much, Coach Mike. As usual, it's just a great time to be with you and share these very important conversations. And we're recording this, during the holiday season, and we really want to just acknowledge the opportunity. It really is an opportunity for us to all think about and talk about this issue of sharing and generosity and giving to others and being generous in all of our efforts to give all that we have to give over the course of our lifetime here on the planet. I know that's what I want to do. I really want to be able to, have given everything that I have to give over the course of my lifetime. And I'm just very happy to having had this opportunity to be alive and to share it with you all out there, including you, Coach Mike.
Same. Thank you, Dr. Murphy. And there you have it. Thank you for being with us. We will see you soon. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah. Merry Christmas. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy holidays.
This has been Snippets of Wisdom with hosts Mike Corral and Dr. Michael J. Murphy. Tune in and learn about the primary issues facing our society today and find the best chance of securing a stable and prosperous future. Snippets of Wisdom will enrich your life and the lives of all of your loved ones.